My name is Dr. Melissa Bond, and I'm joined by some of my wonderful EPPI-Reviewer colleagues, Anastasia and Sergio. And we are here this morning or this evening to talk about interactive evidence gap maps using EPPI-Reviewer, EPPI-Mapper and EPPI-Visualiser. Now, as you'll see on the screen, I do have a QR code there. And I've also got a code with Menti. Now, I use an application called Mentimeter. I really enjoy using this particular app because it allows me to get some feedback from participants as we go along. And I would encourage you to either use the QR code using your mobile device to open up the slides and other interactive features that will happen, or to go to menti.com and put the code in. I'll perhaps ask Anastasia to write the code into the chat as well, in case you can't see the screen for some reason. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, there are two speech bubbles that you are able to click on, or on the app, it might look a little different. It might say open Q&A. At any stage during the presentation, if you've got a question, you can either type it into the chat or you can use Menti to ask the question, and I will get back to it at the end of the presentation. Okay, fantastic. Now, before I begin, I would like to make an acknowledgement of country, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am presenting to you from today, which is the lands of the Kaurna people, the First Nations people here. And I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to respectfully acknowledge the Bawandek and Bangala First Nations people on whose lands our other two campuses from my primary institution are located. So just a very quick intro to me. If we haven't met before, hello, my name is Mel. I am an EPPI-Reviewer support and training officer with UCL, with the EPI Centre there. But currently I'm actually in Adelaide, South Australia, because I'm now a lecturer in digital technology education with the University of South Australia. I do have a few links and things. We'll make these slides available at the end of the presentation so that you're able to get access to any of the other publications and resources that we're going to share with you today. So before we begin, I would love to know, what are your expectations or hopes for today's presentation? If you're using Menti, I'd love you to pop those thoughts in. What are you hoping to get out of today? What brought you here? Have you got a particular question you'd like answered that you already know? Pop it in into Menti, and I will hopefully answer it throughout this presentation. And I see I have Danielle here from Adelaide as well. Lovely. And Zora, brilliant. Wow, Adelaideans represent. Fantastic. Okay, so someone's here to how to start a map, practical ways to use EPI, improve your understanding of what EPI-Mapper can do, interested in knowing any new features. Yeah, this is something I'm definitely going to talk about today because there has been a recent update to the software, which is very exciting. And I'm very keen to talk to you about that today. New features, brilliant. I'll wait a couple more seconds in case there's anyone else that wants to pop in their thoughts. To get more familiar with setting up maps, more acquainted with EPI capabilities. Yes, fantastic. Now, just in case anyone else is adding their thoughts, I will just mention that we have a range of instructional videos available on our YouTube channel. But I'm in the process, I'm about to be creating a whole heap of new videos, updated ones, because you may notice that we're constantly upgrading our software, and so it's a little difficult to keep up with demand on the videos, but they will be becoming increasingly updated. Okay, thank you so much for those comments. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about what is EPPI-Reviewer, what are evidence gap maps, and what is EPPI-Mapper itself. I'm going to show you a couple of example interactive evidence gap maps. I'm going to talk about how to design your coding tool if you're using EPPI-Reviewer, how to create the JSON report that you need to be able to import into the EPPI-Mapper application. Then I'm going to talk about how to generate the map using EPPI-Mapper, and then what EPPI-Visualiser is and how that differs from the EPPI-Mapper application. And I will talk through just a couple of bits about how to create the web database using EPPI-Visualiser. And there will hopefully, if I'm not constantly talking, there will be time for some question and answers and a discussion at the end. Now, I will also mention there are some other icons that have popped up on the slides here down the bottom. We've got a love heart, a thumbs up, thumbs down. If you want to interact with me, that would be just beautiful. Okie dokie. So, EPPI-Reviewer. EPPI-Reviewer evidence synthesis software was created to support the methodological work of the EPI Centre at UCL. As you may already know, it is web-based. You can access it from any device with an internet connection, and it was developed for all types of systematic review, which means it has that flexibility. We know that it enables us to keep our reviews replicable, transparent, explicit, and it also enables us to easily create these interactive evidence gap maps and other forms of openly accessible ways to share the outputs from our evidence synthesis efforts. So EPPI-Mapper was an application to be able to create interactive evidence gap maps, and it was initially developed in partnership with the Campbell collaboration, and it was first created back in 2018 and has since undergone a whole range of different upgrades to be able to enable increasingly advanced features to be used. Now, initially, it required studies to be coded using EPPI-Reviewer, but in the latest update to the software, there is now a way that you're able to use EndNote to create the JSON file to then import into EPPI-Mapper, and I'll be explaining how to do that a little bit later on. There are many options for changing the appearance of the maps. And the great thing is you've got full control of the branding, which means that if you've got specific images, specific text that needs to be included, you're able to do that. You're also able to have these maps exist as a standalone HTML file, which means that you can share them with any of your stakeholders. You're also able to upload them into websites to either to have them as standalone websites or to then embed them into other websites. So I'd love to know whether anyone here has already created an interactive evidence gap map using EPPI-Mapper before. So if you're on Menti, pop it in. Otherwise, if you haven't joined in on Menti, I'm just going to pop the code in. There it is. Okay, so we've got quite a few people here that haven't yet created one. This is exciting. Not sure if you have. All right, I'm going to give you another, let me see, another 10 seconds to let me know whether or not you have used EPPI-Mapper to create an EDM. Okay, so predominantly people here have not yet created one. That's really good feedback for me so that I can understand sort of where you're coming from. And hopefully those people who have created one before using EPPI-Mapper will be excited by the new features that I'm going to be talking about. So to provide an example to you on what these look like, I've got here the Campbell Mega Map on child wellbeing interventions in lower middle income countries, because this is a great example of a map that uses a lot of the available functionality. The link is available down the bottom, but of course, because of the way I've got the presentation here, this isn't clickable, but you will be able to click on it once you've got the slides from the presentation. So this is an example of an interactive EGM, and it shows here we've got outcomes versus interventions. So the outcomes are listed there as the columns and the interventions are the rows. And each of those rows and columns have sections and subsections. And they've also got each cross-section of information is segmented into quality ratings within the cells. And when you hover over them, you're shown this. So it shows you here that there are 36 low confidence systematic reviews in this cross-section of information, mortality and early childhood health intervention, 22 medium, 19 high, and 1 EGM. So if you haven't seen an interactive EGM before, really fantastic visual way of being able to see the overview of evidence that's available really, really quickly and visually. So at the top here of the map, we've got the branding and title, and that's what I mean by saying that you're able to brand the maps in any way that you need to. So we've got here a couple of images and we've got some text, and in that text, you're able to insert lots of different links. Then underneath that, we've got the menu, which features filters, hide headers, full screen, about, submit a study and view records, and I'll explain what each of those are shortly. Then down the very bottom of all of the maps, you have the legend for the segments. And so these are the segmenting features that appear in each of the cells. And so they will show you what color is represented by which particular code that you had in your review. And then at the bottom on the right-hand side, you've also got which version of EPPI-Mapper was used to create the map. Now, this particular map was created using version 2.1. We are now actually up to version 2.2 of the mapping software. So there's been a slight tweak since this particular map was developed. But this is important potentially for you to know in terms of providing the information to your stakeholders on which version of the software was used. So you can also specify in your evidence gap maps how they appear. So which kind of style they're going to be using. And you can do that by clicking on the filters button, and then you'll be presented with these 4 options. Now, this is when the map has already been created. So you can actually choose to specify when you create your map what it's going to appear like, but then the people that use your map are able to change that appearance if they wish. And we have here 4 different styles. So this is the same map that I just showed you, the mega map. Here we have the bubble version, which is my personal favorite. I love the bubbles. We have the heat map. We have the mosaic style. Some people prefer mosaic. It does look nice. And then we also have the donut style. So those are the 4 style options that you can choose from. You can also completely choose the colors, the appearance of your row headers, your column headers, the individual cells, the segmenting attributes, and you can either select them visually. So you would be able to click your mouse and drag your mouse to match a color that suits you, and you'd be able to preview it here. Or you could put in a specific code. If you know the exact code that you want to put in, you can do it manually as well in either the RGB or the HSL style. In terms of the filters that are available to your end users, users are able to filter the studies in the map using either the default, the and, or the or. And so they're able to specify exactly what kind of information they want to see. They're also able to click on any of those cells or the rows or columns to open the references panel, which looks like this. And they can select at any time. They can put in extra filters for the information that they would like to see here. And all of the metadata that you've specified to be shown in your map will come up for them. There is the option to group it by specific segments. So say, for example, you wanted to look for purely low quality studies, you'd be able to do that. Or you can also filter by title, author, or date. And you've also got the option, people have got the option to download a list of a RIS file of the listed references in their selection. Now, in terms of that top menu of the maps, the hide headers button will hide the header area, which contains that the logo, the branding, the title at the top of the screen. Clicking on full screen will make the browser fill the entire screen, which is logical. Clicking on the About button will display a panel that gives you the information about the map. Now, it's optional whether or not you have that feature, and you can also now choose to have this information open already when people open the map first up. If you choose to, this is another optional feature, you can have this Submit a Study button, which will then display a panel on how a user might contact you to be able to potentially submit a study that could be included in your evidence synthesis to display in the map as well. And at any stage, if users want to have a look at all of the items in your evidence gap map, they're able to click on the View Records button, and that will display the list there. Now, new features. I did just mention this, but I wanted to point it out. It's very exciting. One of the new features is, as I said, that you can now set the maps so that the about information will already be open when your users open the map. And that's simply a case of when it comes to the about the map area that you click on that little toggle there and it will open with the about information already there. Another new feature is that you can have the number of records in your map feature next to the View Records button. So I'll just click back a little bit. So here you can have the option, if you want to have the total number of records displayed here at the top of your map, which is also very exciting. And that's where you would do it here, which is in step 5. But I am going to take you through step by step how to create these. You can also choose to, when you're viewing a map, users can choose to collapse sections of rows and columns so that they're able to get a better overview of perhaps of different features of the map. And you would simply do that by clicking on the double arrows on either the columns or the rows. And then what will happen is the bubbles here, or the whatever you've chosen, however you've chosen to show your styling of your map, will show an aggregate of the collapsed section. So instead of being like this, where it's all separated into whatever cross-section of information, here it'll be the aggregated number, so the total number. Now, this is another exciting new development for those people who've used EPPI-Mapper before. You are able to, when you first create your map, you're able to choose to have your rows and or your columns start in a collapsed state. So that this is fantastic, particularly for people who have a very large number of codes, a very large number of information in their maps. It means that they're able to start with a slightly more condensed map, and then the user can choose which area they'd like to focus on. So say, for example, they were only really interested in health and nutrition intervention, they would be able to expand that and have a look at that information in more greater detail without needing to look at everything and being able to, maybe getting a bit confused if there's a lot of information. So I think that's a really great new development. You can also choose whether you would like to have, when you hover over a title of a subheading, whether or not you'd like to have the code description that you've entered in EPPI-Reviewer or elsewhere, whether you have that displayed. So for example, in this image here, you would simply choose to have that on. And you can actually also embed links into the titles of each of the columns. If you wanted to, for example, with mesh terms, if you were working with those, it could go directly to the information about that particular term. As I mentioned earlier, the records panel has a download listed references button. This is an optional feature, so it's up to you whether you would like to enable your users of the map to be able to have this option. But clicking this button will generate a RIS formatted file of all the listed records. And this is a standard file format that people are then able to import into their chosen reference management software. So now we come to the juicy part of things you need to think about when you're designing your coding tool in EPPI-Reviewer, if you're using EPPI-Reviewer first of all to code your studies. it's really important that if you think you're going to create an interactive evidence gap map, that you think about it sooner than later. From bitter experience, I can say this. It's really important to know that your rows and columns can have up to 3 levels. Now, when you see this in EPPI-Reviewer, this here is an example of a coding tool in EPPI-Reviewer. So this is the coding tool name. So this is called Data Extraction Interactive Evidence Gap Map. And if you think of a coding tool like a container, the container contains all of the codes that you're going to have displayed in your map. So this is a visual representation of this map section here. So here we have author information, author continent, and then it's divided, the subsections are divided into the different continents here. And this is how you would set it up in EPPI-Reviewer if this is what you were going to do. So we'll refer to level 1, level 2, level 3. So level 1 here is what we would call a non-selectable code style of code. It means that it's considered a parent code and it doesn't have a checkbox like these do. So I would put in this level 1, I would do it as a non-selectable code. Underneath that, I would then have a level 2 code. So for example, author continent, and then that would also be a non-selectable code. And then underneath that, you would have your level 3 codes, which you would choose as a selectable. And these are the ones where you can then tick here using the codes. And you can also click on the blue info button and type in any extra information that you wanted to add. I will show you shortly how to create these in EPPI-Reviewer in case you haven't done that before. I'd also like to mention that the filters that you have available or you make available to the users of your maps, they can have up to 2 levels. So when you're designing your coding tool in EPPI-Reviewer, this is definitely something you also need to keep in mind. So in order to have 2 levels like this, you would need to have level 1 underneath your main coding tool here, level 1 as a non-selectable code like before, and then level 2 as a selectable code so that you can then select, for example, the publication language. Another new feature, which is also very exciting, is that the segments within the cross-section of data here can now have up to 6 segmenting codes. It used to be that they were limited to 4. Now you may have up to 6, which I think is awesome. But this is also important for you to remember that these should be 2 levels only as well. And so in EPPI-Reviewer, just like with the filters, it's important that you have level 1 as a non-selectable code, and then level 2 you would have as selectable code. So in this example, I have used study level of the participants in my studies in the review. And that then shows all of the data segmented by the study level in the map. Okay, so now you're wondering, all right, that's great, but how do I possibly create these codes in EPPI-Reviewer? So I'm going to take you through that step by step. We do also have, I have on the slides, I have some links to some videos, YouTube, that takes you through this as well, and you'll have access to that after this session. Right, so this is the review homepage of EPPI-Reviewer in case you haven't used it before. To start off, you would either click on the coding tools button here on the left-hand side, or you would expand the coding panel on the right-hand side by clicking on the green codes button and click on edit tools. You would then click on the add coding tool button. You would choose to leave this tool type as standard, and that's what it does come up with automatically. And then give your coding tool a name. So I always, for my data extraction coding tools, when it comes to interactive EGMs, I would always give it some kind of name like, you know, interactive EGM or something really creative like that. And I would also leave it as normal because if you wanted to have it in comparison mode, that would generally be for double coding. If it is in comparison mode, you may need to change it depending on your particular circumstances, but leave it as normal for now, and then click on create. You also have the option to type in a description if you wanted to. So now we have a new coding tool, and it's popped up here in our list of coding tools on the right-hand side. So once you've created it, it will pop up as locked, and you will need to unlock the coding tool before you can add any other codes. So to unlock it, you would click on the coding tool on the right-hand side, then click Edit Coding Tool. Then here, where it says locked, you would click on that so that it says no, and then click on Save. And that will just enable you to unlock the coding tool so that you can add some more codes to it. So the next step is to select the new coding tool on the right-hand side and click on Add Child. Now, if you haven't used EPPI-Reviewer before, that might be a little strange, but we do refer to them as parent codes, child codes, and sometimes even grandparent and grandchildren. So click on Add Child, leave the code type for that first level as non-selectable. So that's what I was talking about with those level 1 and level 2 codes being not selectable. And then type in your parent code name. So for example, author information, and then click on the Create button. Then in order to expand the coding tool, you would click on this little black arrow here and click on the new parent code that you've just created, which in this case is author information. And then again, you would click on Add Child because we want to give author information some children. Here again, because I'm going to be creating 3 levels in my coding tool, I'm going to leave it as not selectable, and I'm going to type in all the content into the name and then click on Create, just like we did before. Then I would expand the coding tool again by clicking on that black arrow there. Click on the name of the new parent code, in this case, author continent, and then click on Add Child. You would then, at that point, change the code type to selectable show checkbox. And this is going to allow you, when you're coding in EPPI-Reviewer, allow you to select which continent or which variable you want to identify for that particular study. Type in your code name, so in this case, Asia, and if you want, you can type in a description for your code. And that's where I was talking about, where you can choose, when you hover in the map, hover over the name of the code, that's where you would type in a description if you wanted that text to appear. And then click on Create. So you would repeat that until you have all of the codes that you need for your map. Then obviously you would need to go through the stages of importing your items, managing your duplicates, and then coding the studies. We do have other videos available to you for those stages, for importing items, managing duplicates. We've got other introductory webinars and PowerPoint slides as well for you if you haven't done that before. We do have those available. And as I said, we will be creating some more videos in the very near future. So once you've finished coding all of your studies for your EGM, you would need to export your data as a JSON file. So in order to do that within EPPI-Reviewer, you would click on the References tab and you would click on the Coding Report button. You would then choose which coding tool you wanted to export the data for. So in this case, I called it Interactive EGM, which is super creative. Then you would select the checkbox called a JSON report. Choose which items to get the report for. Now, it is often the case where you would choose this whole list, but you might want to create the report for some reason for just some selected items, in which case, obviously, you would click selected items once you've selected them down here in the list of references. Then click on Get Report and save to your device. Now, EPPI-Mapper application is located outside of EPPI-Reviewer. So once you've saved your JSON report, you would then go to the EPPI-Mapper app. And this is the website address. It is free to use, and it does use either the JSON report from EPPI-Reviewer data, or it now can use the converted EndNote RIS file, which is a new feature. It is a simple, easy to use wizard, and I'm going to take you through how to use it to create your map. And it allows you to do all sorts of funky things and to include information for people to download and share, etc. So to create your map. So this is what it looks like once you've gone to this, this website address here. And a shout out to Digital Solution Foundry who created it for us. So it looks like this. Here where it says drop data file here or click, and you would upload the JSON file that you've just exported from EPPI-Reviewer, because that file contains all of the data that you need for your map. I will just say though, if you haven't used EPPI-Reviewer and you want to use EndNote, this is how you can do it. So in EndNote, you would need to modify the reference types. And I think I'll need to create a video for this specific functionality so that you'll be able to go through step by step. But you would need to add a row and column field to your publication type, matched to the custom 3 and custom 4 rows. So here we've got row and here we've got column. Then you would add the code specific to the items that you're going to have in the row and column fields, because they're going to make up the codes that you see in the row and column in the map. So here, for example, they want to have in the rows access to assistive devices and access to education. And then in the columns have healthcare coverage, inclusive educational policies, school enrollment, and attendance. Then you would export the references using a special output style. Now, this will be available soon. It's not currently available, but it will be available as soon as possible. And we'll obviously use our social channels, Twitter, for example, to let people know, but it will be available on our EPPI-Reviewer website. Okay, then once you've imported your JSON report, however you've created it, whether that's in EPPI-Reviewer or in EndNote, you would then need to select the column and row data. So column attribute and a row attribute. And then you would select your bubble data. Now, this is the point at which you could choose to show the column description as tooltips. So that's when you hover over the names of the columns and the rows. And if you wanted to do that, you would just click on those toggles so that they appear. Now, these segmenting attributes, this is the bubbles or the cross-section of data that appear in the cells. The drop-down menus will be automatically populated based on the data that it's found in your JSON file. And here, depending on the way that you set up your coding tool within EPPI-Reviewer or the way that you've done it in EndNote, you might only have one choice that you can choose, or you may have none at all if that's the way you've arranged your data, or if you don't want to, Okay, so then once you've chosen your columns, your rows, and your segmenting feature, you would choose the map appearance. Now, you can go with our default colors if you want to, they are quite nice, or you can choose your own style. And again, you can click and drag within the color displays here to choose a custom color, or you can type in the code if you know it. You can also choose here to start with the collapsed column headers and the row headers if you want to, so that you don't have a whole heap of information appearing at one time when the map opens. And you can choose your colors, as I said, for your rows and columns. Then you would need to choose your bubble codes. So the segmenting attributes that feature within your cells. And here again, we come across the children reference. And here you would either click on add all children to add all of the codes that appear underneath. For example, here I've used open access. And that will add all of the codes that you've listed for your segmenting attribute. Or you can also choose to just have specific codes that you want to have appear in the cells. And you would do that by clicking on add segment. Again, yeah, you can select up to 6 now. And if you do choose adult children and you've got more than 6, then only the first 6 will be displayed. Then you get the fun of choosing your bubble color or choosing your heat map color, whichever style you want to use. Again, you can do this manually. You can put in the codes, and you can choose, if you want to record the values, so that record the codes of the colors that you've chosen. However, you can now also save the template of the map that you're creating, so that you can upload the template again if you needed to regenerate or create another map using exactly the same branding and color scheme that you've used in this particular one, which will save you oodles of time. Then you get the chance to preview your color scheme. And if you're happy with that, you can click continue. But if for some reason you look at it and it looks really super funky and not in a good way, then you're able to click on the back button and you can go in and edit it. Then we get to step 4, and here you get to add the information about your map. This is optional, but it is a fantastic way of being able to convey information to your stakeholders, to your users about what they're seeing, and it allows you to also provide further links that they can go to if you have a website that you'd like to send them to, or perhaps other information, the protocol, for example, for the map and things like that. This is also where you could choose to automatically show the about information about your map when people first open it. So you would just click on that toggle there and then that will happen for you. You can also choose here if you want to have that button submit a study appear on your map. This is where you would put in the information about how people could go about doing that. And you would write that in here and then click continue. In step 5, you would choose whether or not you want the total number of records in the map to appear. Again, just use the toggle. Here you would choose whether or not you want to allow people to download a RIS file of the records in your EGM, which I've found really helpful. That's completely up to you. Again, use the toggle. And then you are asked to select what filter attributes you're going to have in your map. You can also choose to start your map now with this filter already open so that people don't necessarily get a little bit lost when they're trying to use the map. If you want to make it really easy for them, start it with the filter open so that they can already see the options that they have available to them. Then you would select here where it says select record fields. This is about the metadata from the records from the studies that you've got in your in the items in your EGM. So here you would select things like if you want to have the years, the DOIs, the author names, the journal titles, all of that kind of metadata, whatever you want to have appeared in the metadata information for the list, you can have that there. I've also got the option to not display the abstracts of all of the studies. If you just want to have the metadata displayed without abstracts, you can click that button. It is important to mention that with the filters, they will appear in the list in the order that you select them. So when you get here, if you don't want whatever comes up there first to appear first, just unclick it. So you would click here, unclick it, and then click the codes in the order that you want them to appear in. Then you get to the branding. Now, this is what appears at the top of your map. You can choose to use a basic editor where you would just pop a title in and then drop some logos, or you can choose to use what's called the advanced editor, which has some really cool features. You can, for example, create a table in the header, which is going to allow you a little bit more flexibility on where your logos and text should appear. And you can do that by clicking on this plus icon here and then clicking the table icon and choosing how big you want it. Now, often when I'm doing it, I will use that 1:3 option because that then allows you to have 2 logos, one on either side, and they're all multiple. And then you can have that center space for your title if you want to. And you can also insert images, and that is the icon there. Just going to have a look at this. How long does an EGM take from start to finish? Now, that is a big question. It depends. It depends how big your study is. In terms of actually, once you've finished coding your studies, it literally can take 2 minutes to create the map itself. But from woe to go, how long is the piece of string? If you say, for example, you've got 20 studies, I don't know. It might take, if you're only working on it, then it might take you a week. If you're working on it amongst 50 billion other projects, then it's going to take longer. That's a really hard one to answer. But you can clarify further if I haven't answered that well enough. But this application, the EPPI-Mapper, literally, I promise you, it takes a couple of minutes and you're done once you've done your coding. It's the coding of the studies that takes the longest amount of time. The branding. You can use different fonts, font colors. You can put background colors, filling in parts of your table if you've got one. You can add images, animated GIFs if you want to get all crazy, videos, almost anything is possible. Then you're ready to download. And this is the stage where if you want to save the settings that you've just painstakingly created with all the different beautiful colors and the logos and all of that, you can download your map template ready to use the next time. And I would suggest you do that, even if you don't know if you're going to do it again, do it anyway, because you may have made a mistake. You don't necessarily want to go back and have to recreate it all from scratch. So I'd suggest you do that. Now the map file, it will be downloaded as a HTML file and it can be used anywhere without internet. However, if you click on this, I want to host the report on a website online button, this will mean that it does need an internet connection. So my strong suggestion to you from personal experience is don't click the button, leave it and it shall be fine. Then click on download. Once it's completed, if you've got HTML, if you've got any kind of really cool skills, if you want to change it in any way, you can do that using an editor. That's up to you. There's lots of things that you can do if you have those skills, but otherwise your map is ready to go. Okay, now before I move on to EPPI-Visualiser, no, I might just move on. I'm only going to mention the difference between EPPI-Mapper and EPPI-Visualiser. So if you've got some questions about EPPI-Mapper, feel free to pop them in and I'll get to them at the end. I'm not going to spend too long talking about this, but I wanted to mention that we also have this other really cool feature, which is, again, completely free for people who use EPPI-Reviewer. So this is a web database tool and it allows you to display the studies and the coding that you've done in any of your reviews, whether or not you've created an evidence gap map, and any changes that you make in your review will automatically be updated live in this database, which is super funky. Has anyone here created a web database using EPPI-Visualiser before? I'm just going to give you a quick little amount of time just to give me an indication of whether or not you've used it before. Lots of no's. I will just say, whilst you're putting your votes in, it is for me, when I publish my studies, when I publish any articles, any reports about the evidence synthesis that I do, it is something I always do now, and I make it available to widely for people, because it's not only is it it's a great advertising tool, but it's brilliant for allowing complete transparency when it comes to the way that you've conducted your review. Okay, all right, thank you so much to those 10 people. No, you haven't yet. I'll move on. I'm going to very, very, very quickly show you, because I know we're running out of time and I want to give you time to ask questions. Very quickly show you, hopefully, Anastasia, can you confirm you can see my web database on the screen? Beautiful, thank you. So this is an example that I created earlier, looking at schools and emergency remote education during the pandemic. And this is an example of what it can look like. So I've set up some introductory information here, and I have actually embedded an image of one of my interactive evidence gap maps. And I've also hyperlinked it so that when people click on it, hopefully it'll open. Yes, it will. Here it is. So I've not only have I created an EGM, I've then hyperlinked it within this web database using EPPI-Visualiser. The other cool thing is people can come in here and say, for example, they were really keen on looking at studies that were to do with math. They could click on math, click list record. And that's interesting. Maybe I'm not logged in. Maybe I've set it up with a password. That's possible. Oh, okay. Right, well, I've lost it now because I went and closed the tab. Apologies. But you can, as you can see on the screen here, you can have it so that you just have it so that it lists frequencies. People can see the studies by year. They can see tables. They can see different cross tabs of information that they want to look at. But you can also upload your evidence gap maps directly into your web database. So you could theoretically, instead of having lots of different links to different versions of your interactive evidence gap maps, you could have one link to your web database, and then that could house all of your EGMs and any of the information to do with your study. And you could just send your users, your end users, to this one location, and they have that available to them. So it's really easy to create one of these. Again, it's free to people who use EPPI-Reviewer and who have done their coding in EPPI-Reviewer first. So once you've finished your coding, on the review homepage, you would click on this blue Setup Visualizations button. You would then click on Add New, type in a name for your web database, type in a subtitle if you want to, that's completely up to you. You can also assign a password to it so you can choose to either have it as open access, or you can have it so that it's password protected, so that only certain people have access to it, which might be good if it's at a certain stage of development and you're not quite ready to make it openly available to everyone. Then you can also set it up so that it only shows certain studies within your review. So say, for example, you've done a review across lots of different study levels from year 1 right up through higher education, and you only want to show studies from schools. You can set it up that the K-12 code that you've used is the only studies that are going to be in this database. And so you could have multiple databases using the same data from the one review in EPPI-Reviewer if you wanted to. But that's completely optional. And then click on Save. Then click the green Edit button and type in a description. Now, this is where that introductory section that you saw on my screenshot earlier, this is where that information will display. And there are lots of different things that you can integrate here, including images, tables, and all sorts of different things as well. Again, say here you can see that I chose to include only my K-12 studies, but you can change that at any time. Or if you didn't do it at the start, you can then go ahead and change that at a later date. That's completely up to you, but you would do that here where it says pick the code after you've clicked on change, and then just expand your coding tool by clicking on the black arrow next to whichever one you want to get your code from, and then click on the code. Yeah, again, if you hadn't done it at the beginning, you can change your access options here and then click on Save. Right, so there are further videos available to you which take you through how to create an EPPI-Viz database, which I've only just shown you the very introductory bits to. We also have the instructional videos on how to create EGMs, and as I said, I'll be creating some further ones. You'll have this available to you in due course. Something here might be interesting to you. And of course, if you aren't already someone who has access to EPPI-Reviewer, for whatever reason, you can always sign up for a free 1-month trial through the EPPI-Reviewer homepage. My links, my information is available there. I will just shout out a wonderful support team, which at the moment isn't me on the coalface, but they're fantastic and they're available to you via the EPI support email, which I highly recommend you get in touch with them if you've got any question. There's our YouTube channel as well, EPPI-Reviewer 4, and we will be also advertising our new videos through Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, that's my personal handle, but we've got, it's EPPI-Reviewer, I'm pretty sure, is our Twitter handle. Perhaps we can pop that in the chat. If you've got time, if you're still on Menti, pop in how you found today's presentation. It's completely personal to me. I am not going to share the results of this. That would be absolutely brilliant. And whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to have a look at the questions. Could you run through some of the traps that we might fall into with setting up the coding, things to watch out for? Yes. One of the major traps that people get into is that they create coding tools that aren't uniformly created. So they might have, let's say you've got three level 1 codes, and the first code that they've got there has some children, but the other 2 codes that they had there originally as parent codes don't have any children. Now, if you do that, the map won't generate correctly. So it's important that where you've got any level, where it has children, that all of those levels have children. It's important. It's hard to explain that without showing it to you on the screen. If that's you and you'd like to know more about that particular thing, just get in touch with us and I can explain what I mean. Anastasia, can you think of any other traps? That's the main one. That one does trip people up a lot. Can you think of anything else?
I guess that's the biggest one. And the number of levels, of course, is, I think that we should highlight it again. Lots of times people create a coding tool that would contain 4 or 5 levels, and that's not going to work, unfortunately. Neither for rows nor for columns. So yeah, up to 3 levels only, that's important.
Yeah,
and that's
definitely
pretty much it, I think. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Can you add new columns or rows mid-review? For example, if you find a new type of intervention. Sure, you can. But you'll need to create a new map. But considering the fact that you can download your template and they really do only take a couple of minutes to create, it's not going to affect you at all. Once you've created your EGM, it is like the information itself is static. Where the information is updated live, that's when you're talking about an EPPI-Visualiser database. But the maps that I took you through using EPPI-Mapper are static. So that means if you can, at any stage, of course, you can add further codes in EPPI-Reviewer, go your hardest, but you will need to generate a new map. Yeah. Oh, and we've already done that one. Okay. Right, at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to ask if anyone has any other questions. Sabina says in the chat, for previous question, protocols will not have all the info coded, so they won't appear on the map. Do we have any other questions from people? Could be about EPPI-Mapper, it could be about creating the EPPI-Viz database. No, then unless Anastasia or Sergio, you have something to add. In that case, I free you. We free you. Have a wonderful day or a wonderful evening, depending where you are in the world. And hopefully we'll see you soon.